You're standing on a frozen shoreline in the Arctic. The wind cuts through your coat like a knife. Snow crunches beneath your boots. Somewhere in the distance, a seal surfaces through a hole in the ice. You haven't eaten properly in days. Around you stand some of the best trained sailors in the British Empire. You have rifles, maps, scientific instruments, two of the most advanced ships ever built. And yet, every single one of you is going to die. Now picture something strange. Just a few miles away, families have been living here for generations. Children are playing in the snow. Hunters are finding food. Elders are teaching skills passed down for centuries. Same environment, same cold, completely different outcome. So what did they know that the British didn't? And why does the answer begin with a toddler pointing at a sunset? Think about that for a second. Because buried inside that tiny gesture may be the single reason humans built cities, crossed oceans, and eventually became the dominant species on Earth. Most people assume the answer is intelligence. Others say language. But here's where things get interesting. Some animals can outperform us in specific mental tasks. Some communicate in surprisingly sophisticated ways. Yet none of them built civilizations. None of them landed on the moon. None of them created libraries filled with knowledge accumulated across thousands of years. So what exactly makes us different? To answer that, we need to stay on the ice a little longer, because this frozen shoreline hides one of the greatest clues in human history. In 1845, Sir John Franklin launched one of Britain's most ambitious expeditions. The goal was simple: find the Northwest Passage. The expedition sailed with two reinforced ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. There were 129 crew members. They carried advanced navigation equipment, scientific instruments, detailed charts, and enough confidence to believe they could conquer the Arctic. For a while, everything seemed fine. Then the ice arrived. Months passed. The ships became trapped. Food supplies dwindled. The temperature plunged. Eventually, the surviving crew abandoned the ships and tried to escape on foot. None survived. Now imagine standing there, not as a historian, as one of the sailors. You're starving. You're exhausted. Yet nearby, caribou migrate across the landscape. Seals surface through breathing holes. The Arctic is full of food. And that's the mystery. These men weren't trapped in a lifeless wasteland. They were trapped in a place they didn't know how to live in. Which raises a bigger question. If intelligence wasn't enough to save them, what was missing? Researchers eventually discovered something surprising. The answer wasn't hiding in the Arctic. It was hiding in a laboratory. And oddly enough, it involved children doing something that looked incredibly stupid. In 2009, scientists set up a simple experiment. A transparent box contained a reward. Before opening it, participants watched someone perform a series of actions. Tap the box, slide a latch, poke a stick through a hole. The strange part, some of those actions were completely unnecessary. You could see through the box. You could literally watch which steps mattered and which didn't. Then the researchers tested chimpanzees. The chimps ignored the useless actions. They went straight for the reward. Efficient, logical, exactly what you'd expect. Then the children took their turn, and they did something completely different. They copied everything. Every tap, every slide, every pointless movement, even when they could clearly see it wasn't needed. At first, adults watching these experiments laughed. The kids looked gullible. They looked irrational. But that wasn't what was happening, not even close. The children were protecting information. Imagine you're watching your grandmother sew a waterproof Arctic boot. She loops the thread twice. Why? You don't know. Maybe it's important. Maybe it isn't. The problem is that you can't tell. If you skip that step and you're wrong, your boots leak, your feet freeze, and suddenly a tiny mistake becomes a life or death problem. So the safest strategy is simple. Copy everything, even the parts you don't understand. And that's where the story changes. Because what looks like blind imitation may actually be one of the most powerful survival strategies ever invented. Now imagine a cave overlooking the Indian Ocean. The air smells of salt. Waves crash against the rocks below. A young human sits beside an older member of the group. The elder picks up a stone. A few precise strikes later, a razor-sharp blade appears. The child watches carefully, not because they're learning a fact, because they're learning a process that took generations to perfect. 73,000 years later, archaeologists exploring Blombos Cave in South Africa would discover clues left behind by people like these. Engraved ochre, shell beads, carefully crafted tools, objects that shouldn't exist unless knowledge was being passed from one generation to the next with remarkable accuracy. Think about that for a second. You don't reinvent complex toolmaking every generation. You inherit it, which raises another question. How did humans become so good at passing knowledge along? The answer begins with a finger. Seriously, a finger. Picture a toddler sitting beside a parent. The child notices a bird landing on a fence. They point, not because they want anything, not because they need help. They simply want someone else to look too. Look at that. That's it. It sounds trivial. It isn't. Psychologists call this declarative pointing. Human babies start doing it around 9 to 12 months old. Chimpanzees almost never do. A chimp might point for food or to reach an object, but pointing just to share attention, that's incredibly rare. And yet that tiny behavior changes everything. Because once two people focus on the same thing, they can start building plans together. They can coordinate. They can cooperate. They can teach. Now imagine an ancient hunter spotting a herd of caribou. He doesn't shout. He simply taps his companion's shoulder and points. One person becomes two, two become five become a hunting strategy. And suddenly, a group begins acting like a single mind. But here's where things get really interesting. Humans don't just learn accidentally, we teach deliberately. Anthropologists studying communities from the Congo Basin to the forests of Bolivia notice something remarkable. Adults slow down when teaching children. They exaggerate movements. They repeat difficult steps. They physically guide small hands. Children correct each other. Parents correct children. Grandparents correct everyone. The entire community becomes a giant knowledge-sharing machine. And that machine creates something no individual could ever build alone. Cumulative culture, a complicated phrase for a simple idea. Knowledge stacks. One generation discovers something useful. The next improves it. The next improves it again. And the improvements never stop. A waterproof boot, a canoe, a compass, a cathedral, a spacecraft. No single person invents these things. They inherit them, add to them, then pass them forward. Everything up to this point was just the setup. Because the same skill that built civilization also contains a hidden danger. Imagine a tiny island in the Pacific. A storm is coming. The sky turns dark. The wind begins to scream. Children run toward caves without being told. Families secure supplies. Everyone knows exactly where to go. When Cyclone Zoe struck Tokopia in 2002, with winds exceeding 240 kilometers per hour, the island was devastated. But almost nobody died. Why? Because generations of people had taught the next generation exactly what to do. The knowledge had been tested by reality, again and again, for centuries. But what happens when people faithfully copy the wrong thing? That's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because humans are so good at learning from others that sometimes we copy things that only look successful. After World War II, some Pacific Island communities watched military aircraft arrive, carrying food, medicine, and supplies. Then the planes disappeared. Some groups began building imitation runways, wooden control towers, mock airfields. They copied what they had seen. They hoped the planes would return. The logic made sense from the outside. The conclusion was wrong. And suddenly a weakness appears. The very ability that made humans successful can also mislead us. Now imagine opening your phone. A video appears. Then another. And another. You never chose most of them. They simply arrived. Infinite scroll, autoplay, recommendation algorithms. Modern technology has become an invisible teacher. In 2018, YouTube reported that roughly 70% of watch time came from recommendations. Think about that. Most of what people watched wasn't actively chosen. It was suggested, selected, placed in front of them. The human brain is still doing what it has always done, looking for models, looking for teachers, looking for people to copy. The environment changed, the instinct didn't. And that's the twist. The same force that helped ancient hunters survive winters, the same force that helped sailors navigate oceans, the same force that allowed knowledge to accumulate for thousands of years. It's still operating right now. Every day, every hour, every scroll. So maybe the real human superpower was never intelligence alone. Maybe it wasn't language either. Maybe it was something much simpler. A willingness to point, a willingness to look, a willingness to learn from someone else. Because somewhere, tens of thousands of years ago, one human noticed something important and found a way to share it. And ever since then, we've been passing that moment forward.